The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of the judge's pen as she reviewed the final documents. 23 years of my life had led to this moment, sitting in a sterile room while my own family fought to strip away everything my grandfather had worked for. They thought they had won. They thought I was just another naive college graduate with no understanding of law or money. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. But what they didn't know was that Grandpa had taught me more than just how to bake his famous apple pie and tend to his rose garden. He had shown me exactly where he kept his most precious secret, one that would change everything these vultures thought they knew about our family's fortune. My name is Madison Harper, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew everything about my family. I was a 23-year-old psychology major at Northwestern University, living in a cramped studio apartment in Chicago, working part-time at a local bookstore to pay for groceries. My life was simple, predictable, and, honestly, I liked it that way. Grandpa Theodore Harper had raised me since I was 7, after my parents died in a car accident on Interstate 94. For 16 years, it was just the two of us in his modest 2-story house in Elmhurst, Illinois. He was a retired postal worker who spent his days reading newspapers, tending to his garden, and teaching me everything from chess strategies to the importance of saving every penny. "Madison, honey," he used to say while we sat on his creaky front porch, "the most dangerous people in this world are the ones who smile at you while counting your money in their heads." I never understood what he meant until the morning of February 15th, when Mrs. Henderson from next door called to tell me that Grandpa had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I drove back to Elmhurst that same day, my hands shaking on the steering wheel as I tried to process that the only person who had ever truly cared about me was gone. The house felt impossibly empty. Every creaking floorboard, every ticking clock seemed to echo Grandpa's absence. I walked through the rooms we had shared for so many years. The kitchen where he taught me to make his secret pancake recipe. The living room where we watched old westerns every Sunday night. His bedroom where he would read me stories when thunderstorms scared me as a child. I was sitting in his favorite armchair, holding his worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive black coat, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the February wind. Behind her stood a tall man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Madison Harper?" the woman asked when I opened the door. "I'm Victoria Harper Whitman. Theodore was my father." My blood went cold. Grandpa had never mentioned having any children. In all our years together, he had never once talked about my father having siblings, about me having an aunt. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping the chain lock engaged. "I think you have the wrong house." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Oh, sweetheart, I know this must be confusing. Daddy and I had a falling out years ago, long before you came to live with him. But family is family, and now that he's gone, it's time we all came together." The man beside her stepped forward. "I'm Richard Whitman, Victoria's husband and attorney. We're here about Theodore's estate and your living situation." "My living situation is fine," I said, though my voice betrayed my confusion. "This is my home." "Actually," Richard said, pulling a document from his briefcase, "this property belongs to the Harper Family Trust. With Theodore deceased, and no will filed with the county, ownership reverts to his surviving children, which would be Victoria." I stared at them through the gap in the door. "That's impossible. Grandpa would have told me." "Told you what?" Victoria interrupted, her voice suddenly cold. "That he wasn't your legal guardian? That you've been living here illegally for the past 16 years? That everything you think you know about this family is a lie?" My hands trembled as I tried to process her words. "What are you talking about?" Richard consulted his papers. "Theodore Harper never formally adopted you after your parents' death. You've been living here as an informal dependent, but legally, you have no claim to this property or any assets. Furthermore," Victoria added, pushing the door slightly, "we've discovered that Theodore may have been, shall we say, less than honest about his financial situation. There are irregularities in his bank accounts, missing funds that may have been used inappropriately." "You're lying," I whispered. "Grandpa would never." "Steal money?" Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, honey, where do you think the money came from to pay for your fancy private high school? Your college tuition? Your car? Theodore was supposed to be living on a postal worker's pension, but somehow he managed to provide quite well for you, didn't he? The world seemed to tilt around me. It was true that I had always wondered how Grandpa afforded my education, my car, even our comfortable lifestyle. He had always just said he was good with money, and that Grandma had left him a little something before she died. We're not here to hurt you, Richard said in what he probably thought was a reassuring tone. We're here to help sort out this mess. But you need to understand that Theodore's assets, this house, his bank accounts, everything, legally belong to Victoria as his next of kin. I don't believe you, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, doubt was creeping in. Why hadn't Grandpa ever shown me any legal documents? Why had he always been so secretive about family history? Victoria pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph, Grandpa as a young man, standing next to a woman who looked exactly like an older version of Victoria. This is me and Daddy at my high school graduation, 1978. I was supposed to inherit everything when he died, but then he got involved with your grandmother and chose her family over his own. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. Even if that's true, I said, my voice stronger now, this is still my home. I've lived here for 16 years. Not anymore, Richard said, handing me a legal document through the gap in the door. This is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days? I felt like I couldn't breathe. But where am I supposed to go? My semester isn't over. I have a job here. That's not our problem, Victoria said, her mask of sympathy finally slipping. You've been living off stolen money for years. We're being generous by giving you any time at all. I looked down at the eviction notice, the legal language swimming before my eyes. This can't be legal. I'm going to fight this. With what money? Victoria asked sweetly. Daddy's bank accounts are frozen pending investigation, and I doubt you can afford an attorney on a bookstore clerk's salary. We're not unreasonable people, Richard added. We're prepared to offer you $5,000 to cover your moving expenses and help you get settled somewhere else. That's far more generous than we're legally required to provide. $5,000. It sounded like a lot until I thought about security deposits, moving trucks, finding a new place to live while finishing my degree. It wouldn't even cover 2 months of rent in Chicago. I need time to think, I said. Of course, Victoria smiled again, but don't take too long. The 30-day clock starts ticking whether you sign these papers or not. Quote, they left me standing in the doorway, holding legal documents I didn't understand, in a house that apparently wasn't mine, mourning a grandfather who might have been lying to me my entire life. That night, I sat in Grandpa's chair and went through every paper in his desk, every document in his filing cabinet. I found my school records, medical files, even my social security card. But nothing that proved he had legally adopted me, nothing that gave me any claim to the house or his assets. But I also found something else. A small brass key taped to the bottom of his desk drawer. It was old and tarnished, with numbers etched into the metal, 847 to 291. I had never seen it before, and Grandpa had never mentioned owning anything that required such an old-fashioned key. As I held it up to the lamplight, I remembered something he had said to me just weeks before he died. Madison, if anything ever happens to me, remember that the most valuable things aren't always kept in the most obvious places. At the time, I thought he was talking about keeping my college fund in a separate savings account instead of under his mattress like some old-timer. But now, staring at this mysterious key, I wondered if he had been trying to tell me something else entirely. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Northwestern to meet with a legal aid attorney. Sarah Chen was a third-year law student who volunteered at the university's legal clinic, and she listened patiently as I explained my situation. I'm sorry, Madison, she said after reviewing the documents Victoria had given me. Without adoption papers or a will naming you as a beneficiary, you really don't have any legal standing. The eviction notice appears to be legitimate. But I've lived there my whole life, I protested. Doesn't that count for anything? It might if you could prove you were a common law dependent or if Theodore had explicitly stated his intentions to make you his heir, but without documentation. She shrugged apologetically. Your best bet might be to negotiate for more time or a larger settlement. I left the legal clinic feeling defeated. Victoria and Richard had all the cards, the law, the money, the documentation. All I had was a mysterious key and a growing certainty that my grandfather had been trying to protect me from something, even after his death. That evening, as I packed my textbooks into boxes, preparing for a move I couldn't afford to a place I hadn't found yet, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just roll over and let Victoria take everything without a fight. Grandpa had taught me to be strong, to stand up for what was right, and to never trust people who smiled while counting your money. It was time to put those lessons to use. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I had 29 days to figure out what that key unlocked, and what my grandfather had really been trying to tell me about the most valuable things being kept in unexpected places. The next 2 weeks passed like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Victoria wasted no time making her presence known in what she claimed was now her property. She showed up every other day with Richard and sometimes a third person, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Collins, who introduced herself as a assessor. I was trying to study for my midterm exams when they barged in on a Tuesday morning, not bothering to knock. Victoria walked through the house like she owned it, which I suppose she legally did, pointing at furniture and making notes on a tablet. This dining room set is quite valuable, she told Patricia, running her manicured fingers along Grandpa's oak table where I had eaten breakfast every morning for 16 years. Solid wood, probably 1940s craftsmanship. We should get it appraised. The piano might fetch a good price too, Patricia replied, opening the lid of Grandpa's old upright piano and pressing a few keys. The sound made my stomach clench. Those were the same keys where Grandpa had patiently taught me to play chopsticks when I was 8 years old. Excuse me, I said, looking up from my psychology textbook. I'm trying to study. Victoria turned to me with that cold smile I was beginning to hate. Oh, of course, dear. Don't let us interrupt your education, though I do hope you're making plans for after graduation. This furniture will need to be moved to storage soon. Storage? Well, we can't just leave Theodore's belongings sitting here gathering dust, Richard explained, consulting his legal pad. The house needs to be cleared and prepared for sale. The word sale hit me like a physical blow. You're selling the house? It's a valuable piece of real estate, Victoria said matter-of-factly. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, mature landscaping in a desirable neighborhood. Richard estimates we could get at least $400,000, maybe more with the right staging. I thought about all the memories embedded in these walls. Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, quiet evenings, reading together by the fireplace. To Victoria, it was just square footage and dollar signs. What about Grandpa's garden? I asked. He spent 20 years building those flower beds. Patricia laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. Honey, buyers today want low-maintenance landscaping. All that English garden nonsense will have to go. We're thinking of a nice modern minimalist approach. Maybe some decorative stones and a few succulents. I watched through the window as they walked through Grandpa's rose garden, Victoria pointing at his prized hybrid tea roses like they were weeds to be eliminated. He had named each bush after important women in his life. There was the Margaret Rose for my grandmother, the Sarah Rose for his favorite teacher, and the Madison Rose he had planted the year I came to live with him. They're just flowers, I whispered to myself, but tears were already starting to blur my vision. The harassment intensified as my eviction deadline approached. Victoria started scheduling property inspections during my study hours, always bringing different people, contractors, real estate agents, interior designers. They would tromp through the house discussing renovations and improvements, while I tried to focus on my coursework. The kitchen is hopelessly outdated, a contractor told Victoria as I sat at the breakfast bar trying to write an essay on developmental psychology. You'll want to gut everything. Cabinets, appliances, maybe knock out this wall to create an open concept. That wall held dozens of pencil marks, where Grandpa had measured my height every birthday. The cabinets contained the dishes where we had shared thousands of meals together. To them, it was just outdated infrastructure. My grades started to slip. I couldn't concentrate in class, couldn't sleep at night, couldn't eat without feeling nauseous. Professor Williams noticed during my abnormal psychology seminar. "Madison, you seem distracted lately," she said after class. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell her everything. About Victoria and Richard, about losing my home, about the growing suspicion that my entire life had been built on lies. But how could I explain that I was being legally evicted from the only home I had ever known by relatives I had never heard of? "Just some family issues," I said instead. "I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. I was drowning, and Victoria seemed to take pleasure in watching me struggle. The weekend before my eviction deadline, she showed up with a moving truck and 3 burly men in coveralls. "What are you doing?" I demanded, running outside in my pajamas. "Moving Theodore's belongings to storage," Victoria said cheerfully. "I told you we needed to clear the house." "But I still have 5 more days." "The lease on the storage unit starts today," Richard explained, showing me yet another legal document. "It's more cost-effective to move everything at once." I watched helplessly as strangers carried away Grandpa's furniture, his books, his clothes, his entire life reduced to boxes and plastic wrap. They were careful with the valuable items: the antique clock, the silver tea service, the oil painting of my grandmother, but careless with everything else. "Hey, be careful with that," I shouted, as one of the movers roughly handled a cardboard box labeled Madison's Photos. "It's just pictures," the mover grunted, tossing the box into the truck where it landed with a concerned thud. "Those are irreplaceable," I said, my voice cracking. Victoria placed a patronizing hand on my shoulder. "Oh, sweetie, you can't hold on to the past forever. It's time to focus on your future." My future. As if I had one without the foundation Grandpa had built for me. That night, I slept on an air mattress in my empty childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes of my own belongings that I had nowhere to take. The house felt hollow, echoing with the ghosts of furniture that had been ripped away. Every sound seemed amplified, the heating system cycling on, the old pipes settling, the tree branches scraping against the windows. I pulled out the mysterious brass key and stared at it in the dim light from my phone, 847 to 291. I had tried researching the numbers online, thinking they might be a safe deposit box number or a postal code, but nothing made sense. Banks in the area used different numbering systems, and there was no location matching those digits. Monday morning brought a new humiliation. I arrived at the bookstore where I worked part-time to find my manager, Kevin, waiting for me with an uncomfortable expression. "Madison, I'm really sorry about this," he said, "but I had a visit from some lawyers this weekend. They were asking questions about you, about your employment here." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "They wanted to know about your schedule, your pay rate, whether you had access to the cash register." Kevin looked genuinely distressed. "They seemed to be implying that you might be financially desperate." I knew immediately who was behind this. Victoria. "Who?" Quote, "Nothing. What did you tell them?" Kevin ran his hand through his hair. "I told them the truth, that you're a good employee, reliable, honest. But Madison, they also mentioned something about irregularities in your background check, something about your living situation being questionable." The words hit me like a slap. Victoria wasn't just trying to take my home. She was trying to destroy my reputation, my ability to support myself. "I want you to know that I don't believe whatever they were implying," Kevin continued. "But my boss is nervous about potential liability issues. He's asking me to reduce your hours until this gets sorted out." Reduced hours meant reduced income, which meant I couldn't afford to find a new place to live, which meant I was even more dependent on Victoria's generous $5,000 offer. The trap was closing around me with mechanical precision. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside the Elmhurst Library, trying to figure out my next move. I had 3 days left before the eviction became final, no money for a security deposit on a new apartment, and now a threatened job. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Madison, this is Victoria. I hope you're reconsidering our offer. $5,000 is very generous for someone in your position. Let's meet tomorrow to finalize the paperwork." My sheer cruelty of it made my hands shake. She knew exactly what she was doing. systematically dismantling my life piece by piece until I had no choice but to accept whatever scraps she was willing to throw my way. But as I sat there in the library parking lot, watching families come and go with their children, I remembered something else Grandpa used to say. The measure of a person isn't how they act when times are good, Madison. It's what they do when everything seems hopeless. I looked down at the brass key in my palm. Grandpa had left it for a reason. He had hidden it deliberately, taped under his desk drawer, where only someone who really knew him would think to look. Whatever secret he had been protecting, it was important enough to hide from people like Victoria. I had spent 2 weeks letting her terrorize me, letting her make me feel small and powerless. But Grandpa hadn't raised me to be a victim. He had raised me to be a fighter. It was time to stop running and start digging for the truth. That evening, I drove back to the house one last time before Victoria's deadline. The rooms were empty now, but I wasn't looking for furniture. I was looking for clues. I searched every closet, every cabinet, every hiding place I could remember from my childhood games of hide-and-seek. In the basement, behind the old furnace where Grandpa used to store Christmas decorations, I found something I had never noticed before. A small metal plate screwed into the concrete wall. It was painted the same color as the surrounding concrete, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The numbers etched into the plate were worn but readable, 847 to 291. My hands trembling, I inserted the brass key into a tiny lock I hadn't noticed. The mechanism was old but well-maintained, turning smoothly with a soft click. Behind the metal plate was a small cavity in the wall, and inside that cavity was an envelope marked, "For Madison, open only in emergency." In Grandpa's careful handwriting were the words that would change everything. If you're reading this, they found you. It's time you learned the truth about the Harper family fortune. I sat in my car outside First National Bank of Chicago, staring at the safety deposit box key in my trembling hands. The numbers 847 to 291 weren't coordinates or a code. They were a box number at the downtown branch where Grandpa had maintained an account for over 30 years. The drive from Elmhurst had taken an hour through morning traffic, but it felt like stepping into another world. The bank's marble lobby was intimidating, filled with well-dressed professionals conducting business I couldn't begin to understand. I felt completely out of place in my jeans and Northwestern sweatshirt, clutching a folder of documents I hoped would be enough to prove my identity. "I need to access safety deposit box 847 to 291, I told the banker, a middle-aged woman named Ms. Rodriguez whose nameplate indicated she was an assistant vice president. She examined my ID and the death certificate I had obtained from the funeral home. "I'm sorry, Miss Harper, but I'll need additional documentation to verify your authorization to access Mr. Theodore Harper's box." My heart sank. "What kind of documentation?" "Typically, we require a will naming you as executor, or court papers establishing you as the legal heir." Ms. Rodriguez looked genuinely sympathetic. "Without those documents." "Please," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "He was my grandfather. He raised me." This key was hidden in his house specifically for me to find. Ms. Rodriguez studied my face for a long moment, then excused herself. I watched through the glass partition as she spoke quietly with an older man in an expensive suit. They both looked at me, then back at their computer screen. When she returned, her expression had changed completely. "Miss Harper, I've just spoken with Mr. Davidson, our branch manager. It appears your grandfather left very specific instructions regarding his safety deposit box." She paused, consulting her notes. "He designated you as the sole authorized assessor in the event of his death, regardless of other family claims." I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in weeks. "Really?" "Yes, and there's something else. Mr. Davidson remembers your grandfather quite well. Apparently, Mr. Harper was a very significant client." The way she said significant made my pulse quicken. She led me through a series of security doors into the vault area, where rows of gleaming metal boxes lined the walls. Box 847 to 291 was larger than I had expected, not the small rectangular box I had imagined, but something closer to the size of a filing cabinet drawer. Ms. Rodriguez used her master key along with my grandfather's key, and the heavy doors swung open to reveal the contents that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The first thing I saw was a thick manila envelope labeled Madison's Inheritance Documentation. Inside were dozens of legal documents, stock certificates, property deeds, bank account statements, and something that made my legs go weak. My official adoption papers, signed by a judge in Cook County when I was 7 years old. "Oh my God," I whispered, staring at the court seal. I was legally adopted. But that was just the beginning. The second envelope contained financial statements that didn't make sense. According to these documents, Theodore Harper wasn't a retired postal worker living on a pension. He was the majority shareholder in Harper Industries, a conglomerate that owned everything from manufacturing companies to real estate developments across the Midwest. The third envelope contained a letter in Grandpa's handwriting, dated just 2 months before his death. "My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then Victoria has found you, and I am no longer here to protect you from the truth. I had hoped to tell you everything on your 25th birthday, but it seems time has run out. Your grandmother Margaret and I built Harper Industries from nothing after World War II. By the time your father was born, we were worth millions. But money changed people in ways I never expected. Victoria became obsessed with wealth and status, demanding more and more control over the company. When she married Richard Whitman, I discovered they were embezzling funds and manipulating contracts for their personal gain. I had no choice but to remove Victoria from the company and cut off her access to family funds. She threatened to destroy everything we had built, so I made a difficult decision. I faked my own financial ruin. I sold my public holdings, transferred everything to private trusts and shell companies, and let the world believe that Theodore Harper had lost his fortune in bad investments. For 25 years, Victoria thought I was living in poverty while she built her own life with the money she had stolen. What she doesn't know is that Harper Industries continued to grow under different corporate structures. The postal worker story was just a cover. I spent those years managing investments and expanding our holdings while living quietly in Elmhurst. Madison, you are not just my adopted granddaughter. You are the sole heir to the Harper family fortune, which is now worth approximately $290 million. Every stock certificate, every property deed, every bank account in this box belongs to you. Victoria has no legal claim to any of it. The house in Elmhurst was purchased under a trust that names you as the beneficiary. She cannot evict you, cannot sell it, cannot touch a single dollar of what rightfully belongs to you. But be careful, my dear. Victoria is dangerous when cornered, and she will not give up easily. Use this information wisely, and remember what I always taught you. The best victories are won not with anger, but with patience and planning. All my love, Grandpa." I read the letter 3 times before the words really sank in. $290 million. The house belonged to me. Victoria had no legal standing whatsoever. My hands shaking, I pulled out the stock certificates and property deeds. Harper Industries owned a dozen manufacturing plants, 3 shopping centers, 2 office buildings in downtown Chicago, and residential properties in 6 states. There were bank accounts at institutions I had never heard of, investment portfolios managed by firms on Wall Street, and trust funds that generated more money in monthly interest than most people made in a year. "Miss Harper," Ms. Rodriguez had returned to check on me. "Is everything all right? You look quite pale." I looked up at her, still clutching Grandpa's letter. "Ms. Rodriguez, these documents, are they legitimate?" She glanced at the papers spread across the small table. Her eyes widened as she recognized several of the corporate letterheads. "These appear to be authentic legal documents, yes. Miss Harper, if you don't mind me asking, were you aware of your grandfather's extensive holdings?" "No," I said honestly. "I thought he was a retired postal worker." Ms. Rodriguez looked at me with something approaching awe. "Miss Harper, if these documents are accurate, you're quite wealthy." Wealthy. The word seemed absurd to me, a college student who worked at a bookstore and lived on ramen noodles. But as I looked through the financial statements, the reality began to sink in. The trust fund that paid for my education wasn't some small inheritance from my grandmother. It was a tiny fraction of a massive fortune that Grandpa had been carefully protecting for me. I thought about Victoria and Richard, sitting in their lawyer's office, planning how to divide up what they thought was a modest estate. They had no idea that they were fighting over crumbs while I held the deed to the entire bakery. But Grandpa's warning echoed in my mind. Victoria was dangerous when cornered. She had already shown what she was willing to do when she thought I was powerless. What would she do when she discovered I had access to more money than she could ever have imagined? The fourth envelope contained something even more shocking, private investigator reports dating back 15 years. Grandpa had been having Victoria and Richard surveilled, documenting their illegal activities, their financial frauds, their attempts to locate and claim Harper family assets. According to these reports, Victoria had been systematically searching for Grandpa's hidden wealth for decades. She had hired private investigators, bribed bank employees, even attempted to have Grandpa declared mentally incompetent so she could gain control of his finances. Every legal challenge had failed because Grandpa had been meticulously careful about covering his tracks. The most recent report, dated just 3 months before Grandpa's death, contained photographs of Victoria and Richard meeting with someone identified as, quote, Marcus Webb, known associate of organized crime families. The photos showed briefcases being exchanged, documents being signed, handshakes that looked more like business deals than casual conversations. My blood ran cold as I read the investigators' notes. Subject Victoria Harper Whitman appears to be arranging for the elimination of Theodore Harper and his heir. Recommend immediate protective measures. I stared at the page, the words blurring as the implications hit me. Victoria hadn't just been planning to steal my inheritance, she had been planning to kill for it. The final document in the safety deposit box was a sealed envelope marked Emergency Contacts. Open only if Madison's life is in danger. Inside was a business card for someone named Detective Angela Morrison with the Cook County Sheriff's Department, along with a note. Detective Morrison has been briefed on the Victoria situation. She has copies of all evidence and authorization to act on your behalf. Trust her completely. I sat back in the small chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I had discovered. In the space of 2 hours, I had gone from being a powerless college student facing eviction to being one of the wealthiest people in Illinois. But I had also learned that my life might be in danger from the very people who were supposed to be family. Ms. Rodriguez returned with a large, secure bag. Miss Harper, given the value of these documents, I'd recommend you arrange for professional security and legal representation immediately. Our bank can provide recommendations for... Thank you, I interrupted, carefully placing everything back in the envelopes. I think I know exactly who I need to call. As I walked out of the bank, carrying nearly $300 million worth of documentation in a leather bag, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For weeks, Victoria and Richard had been playing a game where they held all the cards. They had the law, the money, the power, and the knowledge. But now the game has changed completely. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was about to go on the offensive. And Victoria Harper Whitman had no idea what was coming for her. Detective Angela Morrison was exactly what I had hoped for. Sharp, professional, and completely unimpressed by money or status. We met at a small diner in downtown Chicago, far from Elmhurst and anyone who might recognize us. She was a woman in her 40s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Your grandfather was a smart man, she said after I had shown her the contents of the safety deposit box. He contacted our department 6 months ago with evidence of financial crimes and potential threats against your life. We've been building a case against Victoria and Richard Whitman ever since. She opened a thick file folder filled with surveillance photos, financial records, and wiretap transcripts. The problem is, we needed more evidence to make charges stick. Your grandfather's death accelerated their timeline, but it also gave us the opportunity we needed. What kind of opportunity? Detective Morrison smiled grimly. Victoria thinks she's won. She's getting careless, making moves she wouldn't have attempted while your grandfather was alive. Yesterday, she contacted Marcus Webb again, the man connected to organized crime. We have recordings of that conversation. She pulled out a small digital recorder and pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the space between us, cold and calculating. The girl needs to disappear before she can cause any more problems. Make it look like an accident. Maybe a mugging gone wrong or a car crash. I don't care how you do it, just make sure it can't be traced back to us. And the timeline? This was a man's voice, gravelly and menacing. Within the week, she's already been evicted, so she'll be homeless and vulnerable. Perfect opportunity. My hands were shaking as Detective Morrison turned off the recorder. They're planning to kill me. We're planning, she corrected. This recording was made yesterday morning. By yesterday afternoon, we had enough evidence to arrest Marcus Webb on conspiracy charges. He's already agreed to testify against Victoria in exchange for a reduced sentence. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. So what happens now? Now, we give Victoria exactly what she wants, the chance to commit crimes while we're watching. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe while we set up the operation. Detective Morrison arranged for me to stay at a secure hotel downtown under police protection. For the first time in weeks, I actually slept through the night, knowing that trained officers were watching over me. But the next morning brought a call that changed everything. Madison? It was Kevin from the bookstore, and he sounded panicked. Victoria Harper Whitman is here asking for you. She says she's your aunt and that there's been a family emergency. My blood ran cold. Victoria had no idea I had discovered the truth, which meant she was moving forward with whatever plan she had in mind. Kevin listened to me very carefully. Do not tell her where I am. Do not give her any information about me at all. But she seems really worried. She's lying. Kevin, I need you to trust me on this. That woman is dangerous. After I hung up, I immediately called Detective Morrison. Within an hour, we had a plan in motion. The confrontation was set for the next afternoon at the house in Elmhurst. Victoria had demanded a meeting to finalize the paperwork and collect her $5,000 settlement. What she didn't know was that the house would be surrounded by undercover police officers, and every word would be recorded. I arrived first, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. The empty house felt different now, not like a place I was losing, but like a fortress I was defending. I had copies of all the legal documents from the safety deposit box, along with a few surprises that Detective Morrison had suggested. Victoria and Richard arrived exactly on time, accompanied by two men I didn't recognize. One was clearly muscle, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of dead eyes that suggested he was comfortable with violence. The other was older, well-dressed, carrying a briefcase that probably contained more legal threats. Madison, darling, Victoria said as she walked through the front door like she owned the place. I'm so glad you finally came to your senses. This will be much easier for everyone. Actually, I said, remaining seated at Grandpa's kitchen table, I don't think it will be easy at all. Richard's smile faltered slightly. Madison, you need to understand that we're trying to help you here. The generous settlement we're offering. $5,000 for a house worth $400,000? I interrupted. That doesn't sound very generous to me. Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. The house is worth exactly what I say it's worth. And frankly, given your questionable legal status, you should be grateful for anything. I pulled out the first document, my adoption papers. You mean my legal status as Theodore Harper's legally adopted daughter and sole heir? The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria stared at the court seal, her face going pale as she realized what she was looking at. That's impossible, Richard said, moving closer to examine the papers. We searched all the court records. You searched the wrong courts, I said calmly. These were filed in Cook County when I was 7 years old. Completely legitimate, completely legal. Victoria's composure cracked completely. You little bitch! You think some old papers are going to save you? I've spent 25 years planning this. Planning what? I asked innocently. Planning to steal money that was never yours? Planning to commit fraud? Planning to have me killed? The two men Victoria had brought with her stepped forward menacingly, but I wasn't finished. Or maybe you want to explain these financial records showing that Grandpa never lost his fortune at all. I pulled out the Harper Industries documentation. Maybe you want to explain how a retired postal worker managed to own manufacturing companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. Where did you get those? The same place I got these. I placed the private investigator reports on the table, including the photographs of Victoria meeting with Marcus Webb. Grandpa knew exactly what you were planning. He's been documenting your crimes for 15 years. Richard grabbed the photos, his hand shaking. Victoria, what the hell is this? You told me the old man was broke. Shut up, Victoria snapped, but the damage was done. She turned back to me, her eyes filled with a rage that was genuinely frightening. You have no idea what you're dealing with, little girl. There are things in motion that you can't stop. Like Marcus Webb? I asked casually, because he was arrested yesterday on conspiracy charges. Apparently, he had some very interesting conversations with you about making me disappear. The muscle Victoria had brought with her took another step forward, but before he could move any further, Detective Morrison's voice cut through the tension. Cook County Sheriff's Department. Everyone remain calm and keep your hands visible. The house suddenly filled with police officers. They had been positioned around the property, listening to every word through hidden microphones. Victoria and Richard found themselves surrounded by armed law enforcement officers, who had just heard them implicate themselves in multiple felonies. Victoria Harper Whitman, Detective Morrison said, approaching with handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, extortion, and racketeering. Richard Whitman, you're under arrest as an accessory to these crimes. Victoria's mask finally fell away completely, revealing the sociopath she had always been. This isn't over, she snarled at me as the handcuffs clicked into place. You think money makes you untouchable? You think you've won? I have connections you can't imagine. Had connections, Detective Morrison corrected. Marcus Webb is singing like a canary. Your other criminal associates are either dead or in prison. It's over, Victoria. As they led her away, Victoria turned back one last time. You destroyed everything, you spoiled little brat. Theodore should have left you in foster care where you belonged. Actually, I said, standing up for the first time since they had arrived, he left me exactly where I belonged, as the heir to everything you thought you deserved but never earned. The muscle and the lawyer were arrested as accessories, the house was secured as a crime scene, and I was finally truly free. Later that evening, Detective Morrison and I sat in the empty living room, surrounded by evidence boxes and police tape. Your grandfather would be proud, she said. The way you handled that confrontation. You never lost control, never let them see how scared you were. I thought about Grandpa's lessons on patience and planning, about fighting battles with intelligence rather than emotion. He prepared me for this without me even knowing it. What will you do now? Detective Morrison asked. You're about to become one of the most talked about heiresses in the country. The media attention alone. I'll finish my degree, I said simply. I'll learn how to manage the companies Grandpa built. And I'll make sure Victoria and Richard spend a very long time in prison for what they tried to do. Detective Morrison smiled. Something tells me your grandfather chose his heir very well. As the police finished their work and began to leave, I walked through the house one more time. Tomorrow, I would start the complex process of claiming my inheritance, managing businesses I barely understood, and dealing with the media circus that would inevitably follow. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in Grandpa's chair and remember the man who had loved me enough to risk everything to keep me safe. The most dangerous people in the world, he had always said, were the ones who smiled at you while counting your money in their heads. Victoria had been counting my money for 25 years. But she had forgotten the most important lesson Grandpa had taught me. The most valuable things aren't always kept in the most obvious places. Sometimes they're hidden in safety deposit boxes, protected by patient planning and quiet preparation. And sometimes they're hidden in the heart of a granddaughter who loved him enough to fight for the truth. 3 weeks after Victoria's arrest, I found myself sitting in the boardroom of Harper Industries corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. The building was a sleek 40-story tower with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. 6 months ago, I had been studying in a cramped studio apartment, worrying about affording textbooks. Now, I owned the building where some of the most powerful executives in the Midwest conducted their daily business. The transition hadn't been smooth. The media had descended on the story like vultures, dubbing me the heiress who fooled everyone, and the college student worth $290 million. Reporters camped outside the Elmhurst house, my university dormitory, even the bookstore where I had worked. My face was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune 3 days running. But today was different. Today was about taking control of the empire Grandpa had built and making decisions about the people who had wronged me. Margaret Chen, the family attorney who had been secretly managing Grandpa's affairs for 25 years, sat across from me with a stack of legal documents. She was a formidable woman in her 60s, who commanded respect in every room she entered. The criminal cases against Victoria and Richard are proceeding exactly as expected, she reported. The district attorney's office tells me that with Marcus Webb's testimony and the recorded evidence, they're looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The fraud charges alone carry a 10-year sentence. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. What about their assets? Frozen pending investigation. The house they purchased with stolen Harper Industries funds will be returned to the company. Richard's law practice is being dissolved, and the Illinois Bar Association is reviewing his license. Margaret consulted her notes. There's also the matter of restitution. We estimate they embezzled approximately $12 million over the past 15 years. $12 million. It was more money than most people could imagine, but it represented only a tiny fraction of the Harper Industries portfolio. Still, it was the principle that mattered. Victoria and Richard would spend the rest of their lives paying for their crimes. There's something else, Margaret continued, producing another folder. We've received a request for a meeting from someone you might find interesting. She handed me a business card. James Harper Mitchell, President, Mitchell Construction Group, Denver, Colorado. Another relative? I asked, my stomach tightening. After everything with Victoria, the idea of more family members appearing made me nervous. Your cousin, Margaret explained. Theodore's brother William had a son who moved to Colorado in the 1980s. Unlike Victoria, James has built his own successful construction business without any knowledge of the Harper Industries fortune. He reached out when he saw the news coverage. I studied the business card, wondering if this was another threat or perhaps a genuine family connection. What does he want? To apologize for Victoria's actions and to meet the niece he never knew existed. According to my research, James is exactly what he appears to be, a successful businessman who built his company from the ground up. He's married, has 3 children, and by all accounts is nothing like his cousin Victoria. The meeting with James was arranged for the following week at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in downtown Chicago. I arrived early, sitting in a corner booth where I could observe without being seen. When James Harper Mitchell walked in, I was struck by how much he resembled Grandpa around the eyes and jawline. He was a man in his 50s, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, with calloused hands that spoke of actual work rather than boardroom negotiations. When he spotted me, his smile was warm and genuine, nothing like Victoria's calculating expressions. Madison, he said, extending his hand as he approached the table. I can't tell you how sorry I am about everything Victoria put you through. I had no idea she was capable of something like this. You know about the criminal charges? James nodded grimly. My lawyer filled me in on the details. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, extortion. It's like something out of a movie, except it's real, and it nearly destroyed your life. Quote, we spent the next 2 hours talking, and I found myself genuinely liking this man who shared my last name. James told me about his construction company, his 3 teenagers who were all athletes, his wife Sarah who taught elementary school. He asked thoughtful questions about my studies, my plans for the future, and how I was coping with the sudden transformation of my life. The thing is, James said as we finished our coffee, I don't want anything from you. I have my own business, my own life. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in the Harper family is like Victoria. Some of us actually care about family for the right reasons. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. But I have to ask, if you knew about Uncle Theodore all these years, why didn't you ever try to contact him? James's expression grew sad, because Victoria poisoned that well years ago. She told everyone in the family that Theodore had become bitter and antisocial after losing his money, that he didn't want contact with any relatives. We respected what we thought were his wishes. Another one of Victoria's lies, designed to isolate Grandpa and prevent anyone from discovering the truth about his hidden fortune. The depth of her manipulation was staggering. "There's something I'd like to propose," I said carefully. "Harper Industries has been looking to expand into the Rocky Mountain region. Your construction company has an excellent reputation in Colorado. Would you be interested in a legitimate business partnership?" James raised an eyebrow. "You'd want to work with me after what Victoria did?" "You're not Victoria," I said simply. "Grandpa always told me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when things get difficult. You flew here just to apologize for something you had nothing to do with. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The partnership with Mitchell Construction became the first major business decision I made as the head of Harper Industries. It was also the beginning of a genuine family relationship with James and his family. The kind of connection I had always hoped to have, but Victoria had tried to destroy. Meanwhile, the criminal proceedings against Victoria and Richard moved forward with mechanical precision. I attended every hearing, watching as the evidence mounted against them. Victoria maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by Grandpa and me. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented the wiretap recordings, the financial evidence, the testimony from Marcus Webb and other co-conspirators. They painted a picture of a woman so consumed by greed that she was willing to commit murder for money that was never hers to claim. Victoria's defense attorney tried to argue that she genuinely believed she was entitled to her father's estate, that the murder plot was just angry rhetoric rather than serious intent. The jury didn't buy it. When the guilty verdict was read, Victoria finally broke down completely. She screamed at me across the courtroom, calling me ungrateful, claiming that I had stolen her birthright, insisting that Grandpa had manipulated everyone. It took 3 bailiffs to restrain her as she was led away to begin serving her 22-year sentence. Richard received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. His law license was permanently revoked, and he would be in his 70s before he was eligible for parole. After the trial, I stood on the courthouse steps with Margaret Chen and Detective Morrison, fielding questions from reporters who had followed every detail of the case. "Miss Harper," one journalist called out, "what's your message to other young people who might face similar family betrayals?" I thought about Grandpa's lessons, about the strength I had found in his love and guidance, about the importance of fighting for what's right even when the odds seem impossible. "Never let anyone convince you that you're powerless," I said. "The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when you're patient enough to dig for it. And remember that the people who truly love you will protect you even after they're gone." "What are your plans for the Harper Industries fortune?" "I'm still learning," I admitted, "but I know that Grandpa built this company to help people, to provide jobs, to support communities, to create opportunities. I intend to honor that legacy while building something even better for the future." That evening, I returned to the house in Elmhurst for the first time since Victoria's arrest. I had hired a restoration company to repair the damage from the police investigation and to return the rooms to the way Grandpa had kept them. His furniture was back in place, his books were on their shelves, and his rose garden was beginning to bloom again after weeks of neglect. I sat in his favorite chair and pulled out the letter he had left me in the safety deposit box, reading it one more time. The words that had once seemed impossible now felt like a roadmap for the future. Grandpa had protected me not just with money but with wisdom. He had taught me that true strength comes from patience, that justice sometimes takes time, and that the most important victories are won not with anger but with careful planning and unwavering determination. Victoria had spent 25 years believing she was entitled to something that was never hers. She had manipulated, stolen, and finally planned murder to get what she wanted. But in the end, the only thing she had accomplished was proving that Grandpa had chosen his heir wisely. Tomorrow, I will return to Northwestern to finish my psychology degree. After graduation, I would take on the full responsibilities of managing Harper Industries. I would honor the legacy Grandpa had built while creating my own path forward. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in his chair, surrounded by his memories, and thank him for loving me enough to give me both the tools to defend myself and the strength to use them wisely. 1 year later, I stood before the graduating class of Northwestern University as their commencement speaker, looking out at hundreds of faces that reminded me of myself just 12 months earlier, young, hopeful, and completely unaware of how dramatically life could change in an instant. A year ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium. I was sitting exactly where you are now, worried about student loans, job prospects, and whether I'd ever figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I thought the biggest challenge I'd face after graduation was finding an entry-level position that paid enough to cover my rent. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. They knew my story. It had been impossible to avoid the media coverage of the Harper Industries heiress over the past year. What I learned is that life has a way of testing you in ways you never expect. Sometimes the people you trust most will betray you. Sometimes the ground you thought was solid will disappear beneath your feet. And sometimes you'll discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined possible. In the audience, I spotted several familiar faces. James Harper Mitchell had flown in from Denver with his family, beaming with pride like the uncle I had never known I needed. Detective Morrison sat in the faculty section, having become not just an ally but a genuine friend over the past year. Margaret Chen was there too, still serving as the family attorney but now also as an invaluable mentor in business matters. The most important lesson I learned isn't about money or power or even justice, I continued. It's about the difference between entitlement and earning. Some people believe they deserve success, wealth, or happiness simply because they want it. They'll lie, cheat, manipulate, and even hurt others to get what they think they're owed. I thought about Victoria, now 18 months into her 22-year sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility in Dwight, Illinois. She still maintained her innocence, still insisted that she had been wronged by a conspiracy. Even behind bars, she couldn't accept responsibility for her choices. But true success, the kind that lasts, the kind that means something, can only be built on a foundation of integrity, hard work, and genuine care for others. My grandfather understood this. He spent 40 years building Harper Industries, not just to accumulate wealth, but to create jobs, support communities, and provide opportunities for others to succeed. The transformation of Harper Industries over the past year has been remarkable. Working with a team of executives who had loyally served Grandpa in secret for decades, I had implemented new programs that focused on employee welfare, environmental sustainability, and community development. The company's profits had actually increased as employee satisfaction and public perception improved. When I first discovered the truth about my inheritance, I was angry. I wanted revenge against the people who had hurt me. I wanted to use my newfound power to destroy them the way they had tried to destroy me. I paused, remembering those dark weeks when the desire for vengeance had nearly consumed me. But revenge would have made me just like them, someone using power to hurt others rather than to build something better. Instead, I chose to focus on honoring the legacy I had inherited and building on it in ways that would make my grandfather proud. The Harper Foundation, established 6 months after Victoria's conviction, had already awarded scholarships to over 200 students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation also funded community development projects, small business loans for entrepreneurs, and support programs for children who had lost their parents, kids like I had been when Grandpa took me in. Some of you will face betrayal from people you trust. Some of you will discover that life isn't fair, that bad people sometimes prosper while good people struggle. When that happens, you'll have a choice to make. You can become bitter and cynical, or you can choose to be part of the solution. In the front row, I saw my psychology professor, Dr. Williams, nodding approvingly. I had finished my degree, despite everything that had happened, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while learning to run a multi-million-dollar corporation. My senior thesis on sociopathic behavior in family systems had been published in the university's psychology journal and was being used as a case study in criminal psychology courses. I won't pretend that having money doesn't make life easier. It absolutely does, but money without purpose is just numbers in a bank account. What gives life meaning is how you use your resources, your talents, and your opportunities to make the world a little better than you found it. The Mitchell Construction Partnership had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. James's company was now the exclusive contractor for all Harper Industries construction projects west of the Mississippi, and we were exploring joint ventures in renewable energy infrastructure. More importantly, James had become the family I had always hoped to have. Someone who supported me without agenda, who offered advice without manipulation, who celebrated my successes without jealousy. 3 months ago, I received a letter from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. I pulled out an envelope, holding it up for the audience to see. It was from Victoria Harper Whitman, the woman who tried to steal my inheritance and have me killed. She's currently serving a 22-year sentence for her crimes. A murmur went through the crowd. This was the first time I had spoken publicly about any contact with Victoria since the trial. In her letter, she blamed me for destroying her life. She insisted that she was the real victim, that I had stolen what rightfully belonged to her. Even after a year in prison, even after all the evidence of her crimes, she couldn't accept responsibility for her choices. I refolded the letter and put it away. I never responded to that letter, because there was nothing to say. Victoria made her choices based on greed, entitlement, and a fundamental lack of empathy for others. Those choices led inevitably to her downfall. But I want you to understand something important. Victoria's fate wasn't sealed by my actions or my grandfather's planning. It was sealed by her own character. The moment she chose to value money over family, power over integrity, and violence over compassion, she set herself on a path that could only end in destruction. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. These were the lessons I wished I could have learned in a classroom rather than through painful experience. So here's what I want to leave you with today. First, choose your values carefully and stick to them, especially when it's difficult. The choices you make when you think no one is watching will define who you become. Second, treasure the people who love you unconditionally. My grandfather could have given me money and a comfortable life and called it enough. Instead, he gave me the tools to defend myself, the wisdom to make good decisions, and the foundation to build something meaningful. Third, remember that true power isn't the ability to take what you want, it's the ability to protect what matters and to lift others up along the way. And finally, never underestimate the power of patience and planning. The most important victories in life aren't won in dramatic confrontations. They're won through consistent daily choices to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it seems like no one notices. I looked out at the sea of graduation caps and thought about my own journey from that terrified college student facing eviction to the woman I had become. You're about to enter a world that can be cruel, unfair, and unforgiving, but you're also entering a world full of opportunities to make a difference, to build something meaningful, and to leave it better than you found it. Some of you will achieve great wealth, some will gain positions of power and influence. When that happens, remember that these are tools, not goals. The question isn't what you can accumulate, but what you can accomplish. Your true legacy won't be measured in dollars or titles or possessions. It will be measured in the lives you touch, the problems you solve, and the positive changes you create. It will be measured in whether you choose to be someone who builds others up or tears them down. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I thought about Grandpa watching from wherever he was now. He had saved me not just from Victoria's greed, but from the possibility of becoming like her. Someone who took rather than gave, who destroyed rather than built, who valued possessions over people. After the ceremony, I walked through the campus, where I had spent 4 transformative years. Tomorrow, I will return to Chicago to continue the work of expanding Harper Industries and the Harper Foundation. Next month, I will break ground on a new manufacturing facility in Colorado, built by James's company, and designed to be the most environmentally sustainable factory in the region. But today I allowed myself to simply be grateful for the grandfather who had loved me enough to prepare me for a battle I didn't know was coming, for the family I had found in James and his children, for the strength I had discovered within myself when everything seemed lost. The most valuable things, Grandpa had always said, aren't kept in the most obvious places. Sometimes they're hidden in safety deposit boxes or secret compartments, but sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, in the daily choice to do right instead of wrong, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of hate. Victoria had spent her entire life looking for treasure in all the wrong places. She had searched for value in bank accounts and property deeds, in legal documents and inheritance claims. But the real treasure had been there all along, hidden in the heart of a grandfather who loved his granddaughter enough to teach her that true wealth comes not from what you can take, but from what you choose to give. And that lesson, more than any amount of money, was the inheritance that would guide me for the rest of my life. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.